In the winter of 1941, two dictators faced the same battlefield, but only one truly understood what it meant to survive it. What happened in the frozen fields outside Moscow would shape the rest of World War II. The winter of 1941 descended on the Eastern Front with a ferocity that the German army had not prepared for, and the Soviet army had been born into. By December of that year, the temperature along the front lines, stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea, had dropped to levels that froze engine oil in tank crankshafts, snapped rifle bolts when soldiers attempted to work them, and killed men who fell asleep in exposed positions before dawn came to wake them. It was cold of a kind that Western Europeans understood intellectually, but had not built into their military planning. Cold that Russian soldiers accepted as the natural condition of winter warfare, and German soldiers encountered as a new and merciless enemy, operating behind the lines of the one they had crossed the frontier to fight. Stalin received the intelligence about the German army's condition with the particular quality of attention he reserved for information that confirmed the strategic shift he had been waiting and watching for since the terrible opening months of the invasion. He had survived the paralysis of June, survived the catastrophic losses of the summer encirclements, survived the October crisis when German forces had come close enough to Moscow that the government had begun evacuating, and the city itself had teetered on the edge of panic. He had stayed in Moscow when staying required a quality of nerve that very few political leaders in any era have demonstrated under comparable pressure. And from the moment he had reconstituted himself as a functioning war leader in the autumn, he had been building toward the moment when the German advance would exhaust itself against Soviet resistance and the counteroffensive could begin. General Georgy Zhukov's December counteroffensive before Moscow had driven the German armies back from the capital's outskirts and demonstrated for the first time in the war that the Wehrmacht could be not merely stopped, but pushed backward. The significance of this demonstration went far beyond the immediate territorial gains, beyond the 30 or 60 or 100 kilometers by which the front line moved westward. The significance was psychological and strategic simultaneously. The proof that the German army was not invincible, that the tide could turn, that the Soviet Union had not been destroyed by the catastrophes of the summer and autumn, but had endured them and was still fighting and was now advancing. What Stalin learned in the weeks following the Moscow counteroffensive from his intelligence services, from the interrogation of German prisoners, from the observation of German tactical behavior along the entire front, was something that shaped his understanding of his opponent for the remainder of the war. Hitler had refused to retreat. The refusal was not simply a tactical decision or an operational preference. It was a command of absolute rigidity issued to the entire German army on the Eastern Front in the form of a Führer directive that forbade unauthorized withdrawal and classified retreat without explicit permission as a military crime. The directive was issued in December 1941 as the Soviet counteroffensive threatened operational collapse in several sectors. Hitler, obsessed with the history of the First World War, believed that retreat meant dissolution, that once the army began falling back, it would never stop, that controlled retirement would become a rout, and the rout would become destruction. He had Napoleon's retreat from Moscow in 1812 in his mind. He was determined that the German army would not follow that example. The generals who received the order were divided. Field Marshal Walther von Brauchitsch, the army commander-in-chief, had been physically broken by the campaign and was already being removed. Hitler dismissed him in December and assumed personal command himself. Field Marshal von Bock, commanding Army Group Center, attempted to manage the impossible tension between Hitler's order and military reality. He was relieved in January on grounds as political as they were medical. Those who remained discovered something Hitler had intuited correctly. The German army, forbidden to retreat, did not collapse. It suffered enormous casualties. Men froze in positions they could not abandon. Units were cut off and destroyed, but the line held. The Soviet counteroffensive, which had seemed capable of driving the Germans back to Poland, exhausted itself in January and February against these rigid defenses. Stalin processed this information with analytical intelligence that coexisted with paranoia and cruelty. He understood what the hold order meant. It meant the German army was more resilient than expected. It meant decisive reversal would require sustained pressure. It meant the war would continue under brutal conditions. But it also meant something else. The hold order was consuming German strength. Units ordered to hold exposed salients were being ground down. Withdrawals of only a few kilometers could have saved them. The rigidity that prevented collapse also prevented conservation of force. Zhukov understood this. He pressed the offensive, not expecting immediate breakthroughs, but knowing that sustained pressure would bleed the enemy. The Red Army winter offensives of 1941 and 1942 were enormously costly. The Red Army learned modern warfare through the most expensive method possible, frontal assault. Yet it maintained the initiative. For German soldiers, the hold order was both lifeline and death sentence. It prevented dissolution. It condemned them to lethal positions. Men froze to death. Entire companies vanished. Stalin's intelligence came from prisoners, intercepted communications, and logistical data. German units had fought continuously since June. No rest, no winter equipment, no rotation.
Junior officers were exhausted replacements. The supply system was breaking down. Single-track railways, incompatible gauges, and bottlenecks strangled logistics. The Luftwaffe struggled in winter conditions. Engines failed. Maintenance was dangerous. Air cover weakened. At this moment, Stalin began changing. He had entered the war rigid and paranoid. The purges, the failed defenses, the disastrous counterattacks. Now he was learning. He began listening to professionals. He trusted Zhukov. Their relationship was built on rare mutual respect. Zhukov argued. He challenged. He refused to lie. Stalin valued this and feared it. The winter debate centered on strategy. Concentrate forces or attack everywhere. Zhukov argued for concentration. Stalin chose breadth. The result was costly. Gains were real, but not decisive. Supply lines stretched, formations exhausted. Yet, Stalin learned. Hitler's refusal to retreat was not brilliance, it was fixation. It worked temporarily, but at enormous cost. By spring 1942, Stalin understood. The German army was no longer what it had been in 1941. Smaller, more tired, depleted. Still dangerous. The summer offensive toward the Caucasus and Stalingrad would prove that, but it was no longer invincible. The old order remained. It became Hitler's template. Sometimes it prevented collapse. More often, it ensured destruction. Stalin learned to use this rigidity as a weapon. If Germans could not retreat, they could be trapped. Stalingrad, Kursk, the great encirclements, all flowed from this decision. The German army that seemed unstoppable in 1941 had been stopped before Moscow. It survived through rigidity, and that rigidity would one day break it. Stalin had learned his enemy, an opponent whose greatest strength and greatest weakness were the same. a man who would not bend, and therefore, in time, would shatter.